Thanks for joining us on another REI-NWA podcast. My name is Coley Bailey. I am the principal broker at Lone Rock Realty, and I'm welcoming you to episode 52 with our repeat guest,
Larry Kelly.
Man, you are the broker and investor extraordinaire. You look shocked.
Careful now. Don't pump me up too high.
So, Kathleen gave you the program of contract for deed. And you've done a lot with creative financing. You've done a lot of programs for us on creative financing. So let's talk about a little bit. First of all, how many episodes have you been on now?
I don't
Is this
know.
4? 3? I don't know. If you haven't seen some of Larry's previous episodes, you got to go back and listen, watch them. Really good stuff in there. His whole history. We don't have to get into your total background, but you've been investing in real estate longer than most people have been in the game, and you've seen a lot of different deal structures that a lot of people might not even be aware of.
You know, we talked about it whenever you asked me how my day was going. It's like it's constantly overcoming obstacles, solving problems.
Yeah.
Real estate investing is no different than anything else. It's just in business, your job is to overcome obstacles and solve problems.
Solve the problems.
Contract for deed is one of those tools that sometimes helps you overcome an obstacle or solve a problem.
Yeah. So people run into times when just conventional financing just isn't going to work for whatever reason. And this is one of those tools that could be in the toolbox. Can you dive into what it is and how it works and when you might want to use this?
Well, a contract for deed is an owner finance option that allows you to make the transaction work with the seller who might say, well, I really don't want to sell because I'm going to have a huge capital gains exposure. Okay, well, would you consider seller financing? Well, how does that work? I can't tell you how many times that has come back when I ask that question. Well, how does that work? Well, this is how it works. You're basically the bank. Okay, well, tell me more. For instance, we've got a property that you paid $100,000 for. It's now worth $500,000. To get your money out of that property in a sale, would you like to also collect interest on it? Tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
And would you like to only pay the taxes based on the money as it's received rather than in the same calendar year as a lump sum payment? Well, that sounds interesting. Tell me more.
Yep.
So contract for deed seller financing can work in a lot of different situations. That's one of them. Another one might be where the property may not be in good condition. Okay? And someone needs to sell, but you know that appraisal is going to be challenging. You know that getting construction financing to rehab that property might become difficult because, number one, you're adding to expenses. You're going to have to get an appraisal as is. You're going to have to get an appraisal as complete. So there's some additional cost involved in taking a more traditional approach. But let's say that seller financing can become a bridge to that. And I've used it in that fashion before, is that, okay, you have a property that's really in poor condition and won't finance traditionally. Would you consider seller financing for a short period of time as a bridge for us to get that property in the condition necessary to get it financed permanently?
Right. So you can put it in your name without maybe even without a down payment, just starting to make payments, or
I've done them without down payments before. In fact, that's and we're talking at the moment about seller financing as an investor going to purchase something. Right. And so, yes, a contract for deed allows you to do seller financing, and this word gets used a lot, and I think it gets misused a lot, and that is that by doing it on a contract for deed, you create an equitable interest in that property because your down payment, if you make one, or your monthly payments as you make them, actually creates value in that property in your favor. Mm-hmm. Okay? Whereas lease purchase, lease option, rent to own, those things do really not do that. This creates an equitable interest.
Yep.
Because although the deed is not being transferred, and that's what a contract for deed is that the seller's financing it, but you don't get the deed to the property till you complete all the payments.
Yeah.
It's a resource, it's a tool that allows you to kind of find that in between. So although you're not getting the deed, you are owning the property, you're buying the property. And it works really well for all parties.
Yeah.
Creating that equitable interest. There's some details that I can share whenever we do the class for the Rookie Nook. Some things that you'll want to do to make sure that it's workable. And so contract for deed gets a bad rep, okay? And I think it's unfairly a bad reputation because done incorrectly or it has a lot of opportunity for dishonest and unethical practices. That's not the way that I use it, and it's not the way that I would train anyone to use that tool. But it can be. And we can certainly talk more about that in our class and some of the things to do to overcome that, because one of the things that they do wrong many times is that the contract for deed, unlike a note and mortgage approach, is not normally recorded. And so if something's not recorded, people may not know you have an equitable interest. But in the approach that I use, we use something called a memorandum of contract that we do record with the county clerk's office, which protects your interest as a seller and protects the interest as the buyer. So no one can go out and place a mortgage against the property that supersedes yours.
Right.
So the seller's protected, the buyer's protected. So it's a great tool. I've used it many times approaching sellers, and in those scenarios that I described. Property was in terrible condition. The guy said, look, I've owned this for 15, 20 years. I have a lot of equity. I don't really want to sell it. Do you want to rent it? No, I don't want to rent it because I'm going to have to put some money into this. I want to have some security in this property. So if I'm putting my money into fixing it up, I want to know that I have some security in getting that back out.
Yeah.
Renting, lease option, lease to own, lease purchase doesn't afford that to you.
So that particular one, what was the exit plan there?
What was the exit plan? Well, I always have a refinance. Most of the time, sellers do not want to finance something for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
You know, we're used to 30-year mortgages or even in commercial a 15 or 20-year mortgage. Well, sellers don't want to wait that long for the refinance. So typically, it's a 5-year balloon payment. So why do you want to do that? Well, maybe my credit's not good. Maybe I want the seller to carry this note while I improve my credit so that at the end of the 3 or 5 year balloon period with this seller financing, I'll be able to get a traditional loan.
Yeah.
Those are other reasons that you do. Lots of ways to use this tool. And I've used it that way before. Hey, I got seller financing when I could not qualify to get a traditional loan at the bank. It's really helpful that seller doesn't care about your credit score.
Yeah.
He really doesn't necessarily care about your income and whether you can qualify to make the payments, because if you default, it's fairly easy for him to get it back.
Yeah.
Pretty easy. And so there's some assurances to that.
That's great. So what are some pitfalls to avoid? And let's take it from both sides, maybe. So, and you were talking about some of the assurances that sellers have. Are there any big downsides that sellers should be aware of?
Well, they can't go out and borrow the equity on it. That's one of the things that it's a sale.
Yeah. Okay.
So it is in the favor of the buyer that equity starts to build.
Yeah.
You establish the basis for your sale price. Well, your equity is built into the sale. You're going to get your equity in more of a lump sum whenever the refinance occurs. So it's a sale. You no longer have any kind of equity draw on that and can't use it to buy other properties and things like that.
Yeah. You're just the bank.
You're just the bank.
You're collecting the payments.
So if you're looking to do a line of credit on properties that you own or those types of things, well, this would not be able to be done after this point.
Yeah. So from a buyer's perspective, what are some of the drawbacks maybe?
If you were not recording a memorandum of contract,
right,
then it would expose you to having the seller be able to do those things like draw a line of credit. Mm-hmm. Unscrupulous players have actually gone out and sold the property multiple times.
Yes.
And that's the reason a lot of attorneys have a bad taste about contract for deed. Just using the term has a bad reputation. Anything, I think, if you do it wrong, can have a bad outcome.
Yeah. Is it an interchangeable term with owner financing, seller financing? Are there any differences there?
Seller financing can be done with a note and mortgage. Mm-hmm. If you own the property free and clear and you want to sell that, you can certainly do a note and mortgage just like a traditional lender.
Okay.
But the foreclosure process is much more complex and more judicious than if it were a contract for deed. Typically, we establish the terms at the time of signing and agreeing to the seller financing on contract for deed, that if you default, that we normally get a quitclaim deed signed in advance, so that it's very easy if you default on payments to simply have the seller go down and file that quitclaim deed. And whereas a note and mortgage in Arkansas has a definite process for judicial foreclosure.
Okay.
So it's a little more costly, a little more time consuming, a little bit more formal.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Now, there was one thing that Kathleen wanted me to include in our conversation.
Okay.
And that was that sometimes personalities between buyers and sellers get involved, and the seller may not want that responsibility, and the buyer may have some uncertainty about whether or not that seller is trustworthy to handle things in a proper manner. So investor escrow services is one of those avenues that I use. And it's an escrow service that collects those payments, documents the payments, and as a third party kind of takes those personalities out of the mix. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk more and more about those benefits in the program. But by doing that, then you have some more assurances that you're dealing with an escrow company directly rather than just buyer directly or seller directly.
Right.
And you have a third party involved to document those payments, handle all the taxes, notifications for your deductions and those kind of things. And it makes it simpler to document foreclosure activity as well, because it's not a matter of opinion. You've got a third party that says, no, the payment hasn't been made.
Yep.
And so you're authorized. The other thing quickly with that escrow service is that as you go through that process of payments, hey, it may be difficult to track that seller down whenever all the payments are made. Using an escrow service provides that third party that's authorized to give you the deed once you've handle all the obligations under this agreement.
Yep.
You know, we've done some with out-of-state sellers. Well, you don't have to go to Minnesota to find the guy to get your deed after you make all the payments.
Right, because it's held by that third party.
It's held by the third party who's authorized to give that file to you and record the deed.
Yeah.
So very big benefit in that.
Fantastic. Well, I think this is going to be a really good rookie nook, and I think there are so many intricacies to this that I feel like it actually kind of goes beyond the rookie nook status as well. So, regardless of where you're at in your investing journey, make sure to come out to our rookie nook this coming October 24th. 2024. It'll be at 5:30 at the Whole Hog Cafe in Fayetteville. We'll get started at 6, and I'm sure we'll have a Q&A as well. Okay, so if you liked this taste of Contract for Deed with Larry, make sure to come out to that program. We look forward to seeing you there. As usual, it is $0 at the door if you are an REI-NWA member, $20 if you're not. But either way, we'd love to see you. Come on out and let's talk about contract for deed, owner finance, and how to get creative with your real estate deals. Well, that's it for this 52nd episode of REI-NWA Podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.